salmon, and I've forgotten that bumper sticker already, but logging, including climate change and how trees provide oxygen into our air and are actually the lungs of the world in the climate change age. You have proceeded to move 308,000 acres from Forest Service agency to BLM. Is that correct? Because that's what
You're talking about the ONC bill?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's good enough for government work here. That's probably close enough.
And you have also stated a goal of 400 million board feet per year on logging in Oregon. And it appears that the logging is mostly around Lincoln County and those areas in the Coast Range. This sounds like a lot of logging, and we depend on our forests for salmon habitat enhancement. And it's important to keep our forests intact. So I would like to hear what you have to say.
Question is about logging and particularly sustainable logging. And I've got staff here. Is Mary Gautreau floating around back there, who worked for the Forest Service and is probably as much responsible for our bill as anybody. So feel free at any point to go back and talk with her as well. My view is that if you're trying to come up with sensible natural resources policy, which I define as making sure that people can actually make a living in rural areas, resource-dependent rural areas, while we protect our treasures, our land, air, and water. When you're trying to do that and strike a balance, nobody is going to throw you a parade the day after the bill is passed. You are going to make a lot of people angry on all sides of that discussion, which I seem to have a unique ability to do anyway. So there you are. The bill that we introduced has received support across the political spectrum. We got votes on the Democratic side, Republican side. You know, the legislation that I authored, you had some of the most conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats vote for it in the committee, the ONC legislation, because a number of prominent environmental groups, Mary's got the list, endorsed it. They said that we think that this is an approach that works for these hard-hit, particularly resource-dependent communities in rural Oregon. And they liked the fact that it was an alternative to what the House of Representatives was talking about, which basically set aside the federal environmental laws. Said we're just going to set up a bunch of private trusts and the federal environmental laws won't apply. And I said, gee, that movie's not going to end very well. And the reason I know it is because we tried it once before with the spotted owl when we put a rider on and said the federal environmental laws, and everybody lost. The timber side lost, the environmental side lost, and basically everybody lost except the lawyers' full employment program, which was good to run down the federal courthouse and sue each other. So I do think that the kind of work, particularly that Mary did, is very sensitive to what you're talking about. We had buffers by the streams. We had special water protection districts in the more metropolitan areas. The timbering is spread across the counties. It is not just in Lincoln County. So I think this is a balanced bill. And the question is really, are we going to say we're going to turn these rural communities into sacrifice zones and just write them off and say that's that, we'll turn out the lights and it'll be sort of like the last picture show. And on my watch, that's not the way it's going to work. And I've said that my hometown is Portland. Southeast Portland is where we live. And I desperately wanted to play for the Trailblazers or somebody in the NBA. Went to school on a basketball scholarship. It was a ridiculous idea that I played in the pros. So I was too small, and I made up for it by being really slow. I love Portland. I love Washington County, but I'm not a United States Senator from the state of Portland. Our job is to represent every nook and cranny of Oregon. And I just don't think we ought to turn our back on all those counties in the rural part of the state. And Mary can visit with you, take you through the maps, keep you up until the wee hours reading and inspecting and looking at all of the alternatives. And we would welcome your suggestions. But I think it's a balanced approach. And that's why a number of environmental groups who had not supported bills that would double the harvest, which is what our bill does in a sustainable way, are supporting the legislation.